They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I am Lou Ruggieri. That's Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be accessing our fine program, we appreciate you taking some time to spend it with us. We are going to try to make it worth your while, and we have quite a show, chock full of sports, news, stats, entertainment, and dare I say fun. Coming up in the second hour, we're going around the NBA. We have a lot to get to. We have our first annual Benchy Awards, Benchwarmerz, Benchy Awards. We skewed a little negative this year. Maybe we'll change that next year, but probably not. Least valuable player in the NFL's 2020 season. We have the Freedom Award, the Underachiever of the Year, the Overachiever of the Year, the Aaron Donald Award, Most Surprising Team, Most Disappointing Team. And we'll get into some of those, especially the things like the Freedom Award. We'll explain that in a little while, but suffice to say, it'll be fun. NFL gave out their awards also. We're going to touch on that a little bit later this hour, the Hall of Fame class of 2021. We'll get into thoughts and feelings about some of those guys and some interesting stats along the way. But first, in case anybody's been sitting under a rock, the Super Bowl 55 happened, and Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes quite resoundingly, actually. By the way, you can follow us along. We're iHeartRadio, podcasting, and Amazon Podcasts, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. So please sign in, tune in, like us if you like us, and leave us a good review, just to shoehorn that in there. But I'll start off by saying this. Jose, I'll get your reaction in a second, but I just want to start after some long contemplation and watching the career that Tom Brady has had and what happened with Patrick Mahomes and the Bucs this year. I've come to the realization that the greatest quarterback of all time is, in fact, Joe Namath. And I'll explain. I've said this once before, weeks ago, months ago, and I'm going to explain. In my eyes, I think Todd Bowles was the MVP of Super Bowl 55. He, not single-handedly, but he just embarrassed the Kansas City Chiefs offense and made them look pedestrian and beat Patrick Mahomes worse than he's been beaten since college. But Todd Bowles, as you might remember, suffered under the Jets regime for several years. He was head coach of the Jets in 2015. He managed to go 10-6, so there was a little spark, but it was still second in the AFC East. 2016, 2017, he had 5 wins apiece. 2018, he had 4 wins, and then he was fired. So as we see, the Jets curse has taken hold again. Anybody that goes to the Jets goes there to die. Or at least their careers do. And we've seen how many examples of this over the years. But Todd Bowles now going from a 4-win Jets team to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he was able to be the defensive coordinator and stifle one of the highest flying offenses we've seen in recent memory. And that leads me to believe that if you go to the Jets, your success and your ability to be great is so depressed that it's almost impossible to come out of. Which leads me to Joe Namath. And if you think about what Joe Namath did in Super Bowl III against the best team in the league, in the Colts, he won the Super Bowl as a Jet. And that leads me to believe that if on any other team, Joe Namath right now would probably have 10 Super Bowls. So that is why I thought that Joe Namath is the greatest quarterback of all time. I'd say that's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. It's hard to argue with Tom Brady. But, Jose, I'm going to start off by asking you this. And in watching the Super Bowl, and we were texting throughout the game, at what point did you realize that the Chiefs were probably going to actually lose the Super Bowl?
It was when I think there was a point where they were down 31-9, and it was in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, well, like, what are you really going to do? Especially with Tom Brady on the other side. It's one thing if Tom Brady was the one who was down 31-9, but with Tom Brady on the other side, it's like I can't envision him not getting 3 more points or not getting another touchdown. Like, you're really going to outscore them. What was it at that point? My math is not very good, but with 20-something points or 22 points, it would have been. You'd have to score 22 points without them scoring at all in the fourth quarter. I just didn't think that was possible. And so, yeah, once it started kind of being around that time, and then they went out and then they scored, I forget what the final score was. I think it was 33 or 38-9 or something like that.
Yeah.
Once they did that, it was just like, well, this game is over, and now I'm just waiting for it to. So yeah, they basically win it 31-9. Yeah, and basically they just never did anything else. And you're talking about what Todd Bowles did. This really reminded me of what the Seahawks did to the Broncos years ago, when the Broncos came in with this dangerous, high-flying offense.
Yeah, Peyton Manning set records. He's threw 55 touchdowns that year.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you can still win with smash mouth football. That's what we saw. The Bucs being more physical at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I know that Mahomes was only sacked 3 times, but they basically had him on the run every single. Like, it felt like every single snap, he was having to scramble left, scramble right, buy time. The defensive game plan to double team Kelsey and then bracket Tyreek Hill, it just worked perfectly. I know that they both had their numbers. But what we also saw is that Mahomes doesn't really have other weapons that he trusts, because even with Kelsey and Tyreek Hill basically double teamed every play, Kelsey still saw 15 targets.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the Bucs could do whatever they wanted to do on offense. They really had a balanced attack, won the turnover battle, won the penalty battle. They were just better from top to bottom, and it's really surprising to me. Really surprising to me. They just got out-muscled.
I think in terms of what you're talking about, too, I think Next Gen Stats had an interesting stat. It was Patrick Mahomes, the amount of yards that he ran scrambling, just side to side or just trying to get out of harm's way. And it was almost, I think it was 459 yards. It was almost 500 yards that he was running on a toe that he just had surgery on, I think, today. And, I was kind of upset to see, obviously Eric Fisher went out last week with the Achilles injury. And that's just a nightmare. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. You have, your one of your best offensive linemen, number 1 pick overall back in 2013. He just gone the week before the Super Bowl. And then the guy that substituted him, I can't think of his name right now, but he was the same guy who was supposed to block Von Miller in the Super Bowl against the Carolina Panthers, where Von Miller, by the way, was the MVP of that Super Bowl. So he did not do now, granted, Von Miller's pretty good, but he, didn't do a very good job against Von Miller, and also with 1 week's worth of practice, didn't do a very good job against, very, very.
It was Mike Rimmers.
Yes, right, that's it, yeah. And so I think somewhere around the fourth quarter, because I kept waiting, I texted you this early on that, both Tom Brady, I think Tom Brady has 3 points in the first quarter of a combined 3 points of every Super Bowl he's had before this one. He just is a notoriously slow starter. And the Chiefs are also incredibly notorious slow starters. And we've seen them get down, and they were down in every playoff game last year. And so it kept feeling like, they were down, 24 points to the Texans last year and rallied back to score 50, I think it was, unanswered. And so you just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. Like, all right, when are they going to turn it on? When are they going to turn it on? When are they going to turn it on? And I think it was midway through the fourth quarter where it was just like, Patrick Mahomes was running, and he looked not like Patrick Mahomes that we've seen. He looked mortal. He looked human, and he's running around. And I think when there was 2 plays that he almost made where he's scrambling, and it looked like he was just lost. And somehow manages, there was one where he did like a pirouette, turned around and whipped the ball down probably about 35 yards, and it just bounced off the defender's helmet. Like, he still made that play. And it just felt like, man, they're just out of sync. They're just not clicking. And like we saw, not just with the Seahawks and the Broncos, but, when Tom Brady was on the other side of the ball with that prolific offense in that 07 team that was undefeated. So they ran into that Giants defensive line that was just too good and too fast. And if you can get to Mahomes and Brady back then by just rushing 4, you're not leaving yourself susceptible to the big play on the back end. And that's, and I thought that they would let up on that in the second half. I kind of felt like that might have happened. But even when they had that amazing goal line stand, the Chiefs, I thought that was going to be the turning point. I thought that was going to be the point where you go, uh-oh, they're going to drive down 99 yards and score, and then they're going to start kicking tail. And it didn't happen. It was crazy. I was just blown away.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me as I look back on this game, that after you get past Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, there just is a huge drop-off in, we talked about Mecole Hardman being one of the fastest players in the league. We've seen what Sammy Watkins, I think former top 10 draft pick, Brian Pringle. These guys just don't scare defenses. And you can line up one-on-one with these guys and not be worried at all. And I think that's what we saw exploited out there, where it's like, hey, they're just gonna like, if we can just limit the huge oh my god plays that they get to Tyreek Hill, that they get to Travis Kelce, who, by the way, still had a great game. But if we can just kind of limit the damage, these guys are a regular team. And that's what we saw. They were made to look like a regular team. They got beat up all over the field. And I heard some complaints about penalties not going the Chiefs' way. As a 49ers fan from a year ago, I don't want to hear it, because there were plenty of penalties that went their way a year ago that didn't go their way this time around. That's the way the game is.
Yeah, and the one thing I noticed too was you could see because there was all and I don't want to hear like I didn't like hearing them talk about the GOAT conversation as part of like the broadcast. Like that's the thing for like sportscasters and pundits and guys like us to talk about. That shouldn't be part of the Super Bowl broadcast, I didn't think. But regardless, I think that what was interesting was seeing the experience gap between Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, who, Tom Brady, GOAT, and everybody's sort of ready to crown Patrick Mahomes as like the GOAT in waiting, and he's he could be better than Tom Brady. And it's like, okay, but in this game, you saw the experience shine through, where Tom Brady took what the defense was giving him and didn't make mistakes and kind of just let the game come to him. He did what was necessary. He didn't feel like he had to win the game for them. He just had to not lose it. And Patrick Mahomes, on the other hand, he didn't take those little check down routes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire could have caught how many more passes if they just used that instead of trying to go for the home run every time. It's like a fighter who just is trying to get that roundhouse knockout punch, and meanwhile is getting just jabbed to death and getting body blows and beat up that way. And
it reminds me of a basketball team that is a fast-paced, fast break type of team, and then you force them into a half-court game, and then they can't really beat you, and that's what we saw. So yeah, that's a great analogy.
And so I also think that Tom Brady should be considered for GM of the year, because I don't think that it was a coincidence that the three of the touchdowns that they scored, Gronk had 2 of them, Antonio Brown had 1, and Leonard Fournette scored 1. Those are all guys that were there specifically because Tom Brady was there. So, I don't know. And Gronk also, interesting stat that I was shocked to believe was true, that Gronk was the first player in Super Bowl history to catch the first and second touchdowns of the Super Bowl, like as the same player.
No, that is shocking. That's 55 Super Bowls. It's shocking that hasn't happened in 55 years. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
And I think I texted you. I think I texted you this while the game towards the end. Who do you think was more upset, Julian Edelman or Jameis Winston, watching the Super Bowl?
Definitely Jameis Winston. To me, I mean, I know Tom Brady's the GOAT, and it's like, of course he's better than you are. But this team was literally 7-9 last year. Couldn't even sniff the playoffs. You leave, he comes in, and they're Super Bowl champs. Like, it's one thing if you had gotten to the playoffs, won a playoff game, and hey, Tom Brady just put them over the top, right? It's another thing was like your team was trash when you were there. They just replaced you and became a Super Bowl team.
I think it's Edelman, because if I'm Jameis and I have even the remotest bit of self-awareness, I have to step back and go, all right, well, Yeah, I mean, that's Tom Brady. Like, if I'm, I think I made the same analogy. If I'm John Starks and Michael Jordan comes in to replace me, and then all of a sudden the Knicks win the title, I have to go, all right, well, he is the best one ever. He should.
Yeah, but it's
but
Jordan when he's like 43.
Well,
it's
the age doesn't line up, but yeah, I think Edelman, on the other hand, is watching, not only Brady have fun and throw touchdowns and have this great offensive year, but Gronk too. Two of the three amigos down there, and Gronk is making, Super Bowl touchdown plays. Edelman's sitting home on his couch. Like, he's been home on his couch. Well, he got hurt, but the Patriots they had no chance in the playoffs, and he's just got to be sitting like in an island up in Boston, just sad. Like,
yeah,
I could take Scotty Miller's place. I could be catching those two.
Edelman can take solace in his 3 Super Bowl rings that keep him company late at night when he's upset about not winning a 4th ring, while Jameis Winston hasn't won anything. Well, I guess he did win a national championship when he was in college, so don't want to take that away from him. So, to me, the one thing, just the one storyline I was just going to say is that I think this is absolutely was something that needs to be talked about. Tom Brady, that we already knew that he was the greatest quarterback of all time. Yeah, we basically said that he was maybe the greatest football player of all time, maybe next to like 2 or 3 other guys that you could possibly put in the discussion. I think at this point, he's now in the discussion for greatest athlete in American history. Where, I mean, I guess you could, I don't really include the Olympics a lot of times, but I guess you could include guys like Michael Phelps and Jim Thorpe and those. But I'm talking team sports: Jordan, Ruth, Brady, Gretzky, and I guess Tiger is not, golf's not a team sport, but those are, I mean, and there might be a couple others I'm forgetting, but he's in that list now, where you're talking about the greatest athletes of all time. He has to be included now.
Yeah, so that sort of parlays into my question. My question to you was going to be, does this win by the Buccaneers, does it do more to help Tom Brady's legacy or hurt Patrick Mahomes' legacy? Or perceived legacy, I guess, because he doesn't have, he's only got which does it do more for you?
Me right now, I think it does more for Brady because I feel like Brady's story is closer to the end, I think. I have no idea how long Scott is going to play, but I think his story is closer to the end. Where Mahomes, I think it's legitimate that he could have 10 to 12 more years. And we could be in 7 years not even really thinking about this and saying, oh, yeah, he lost the Super Bowl and an AFC championship game to Tom Brady. That's okay. We can look the other way on that one,
Yeah, I agree. I think it does more for Tom Brady. I thought very sneaky good tweet. I don't know if you saw it, but Robert Ory tweeted to Tom Brady and welcomed him to the 7-ring club. Slightly different legacies with those 7 rings, but I think what I realized, that they put up some graphic during the Super Bowl, and what blew my mind was Tom Brady now, because I mean, for how long? I mean, we used to argue, all the way back at Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, who's better. And I had Tom Brady, by the way. I'd like to take a bow right now. But Tom Brady almost has as many rings as the next 2 quarterbacks combined. Like Terry Bradshaw and Joe Montana combined have 8 rings. Tom Brady has 7.
Yeah. I mean, the gap is just so wide now. The gap is just so wide.
I said this the week, before the Super Bowl, but the last sort of Achilles heel to Tom Brady's legacy was it was hitched to Bill Belichick, where everyone, there's certain people that said, Tom Brady was only successful because of Bill Belichick, and Matt Castle won 11 games with the Patriots. But by the way, that team had Randy Moss on that team. That was still one of the best teams in the history. So if you think of that team that Matt Castle won 11 games with, Brady won 16. So there's still pretty good gap. I feel like that gets lost a little bit, how good that team was offensively still, regardless. But I digress. Tom Brady, he's done it, and he keeps doing it. And now the thing that was hurting him was Belichick. And now that he's taken this team, past, because Joe Montana was the closest thing we had. And, people would argue, well, Joe Montana went to the Chiefs and brought them to the AFC title game. They lost to the Bills, obviously, but he still that's still a pretty successful post-career of your most successful part of your career. So Brady going to the Bucs now, surpassing even that, is just, it's the nail in the coffin. I mean, not that they needed another one, but that's just, it's game over. I mean, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, I think I gave up on the Manning versus Brady discussion after he beat the Falcons, seems like 7 years ago now. But I mean, it's just, it's there's nothing to say. He's just
amazing. By the
He's
way,
incredible.
So after the Super Bowl, and because I wanting to some sort of football encore, because I was sad that the season was over, I went back because I was watching and I was trying to think of that Super Bowl against the Falcons, because it felt like the Chiefs could have pulled that off. Until the very end of that fourth quarter, it felt like the Chiefs still had a chance. And so I was like, let me go see. And I went back and watched the second half of that game of the Super Bowl against the Falcons, because everyone, the first half was boring. It was just the Falcons.
Did you throw up from the mismanagement? My goodness, go ahead.
I was watching it, and even knowing the end, I was questioning how they were going to win. I knew the end result was that the Patriots were somehow going to win, but watching it, it was mind-boggling that they even had a prayer, because it looked a lot like this Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Guys were missing open catches, balls were hitting them in the hand. Brady was just not on his game. He's thrown an intercept. He threw a pick six. The running game was just tearing them up. And it's somehow, I watched it again, and it was still mind-blowing to see him do that. And I guess the confidence, not only for Brady, that must have imbued in him, but the confidence that he can bring to a team that it's no, we're going to win. And there's nothing that they can do, because I've been down, I've been worse, and now we're up. So there's no chance that we're not going to win now. So it was incredible.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I have in front of me the Super Bowl odds for Super Bowl 2022. Do you want to guess the top or the bottom of the list?
Oh, God. The bottom of the list has got to be the Jets. It's got to be the Jets.
It is not, actually. The Jets are plus 6,600. They are fourth worst.
There are 3 teams worse than the Jets? I'm sorry. I don't mean to be...
Yes.
I have not seen the odds, so now this is actually more fun than guessing the top. I'm going to say then the Jaguars.
Jaguars are third worst, plus 8,000.
What? There's two teams that are worse?
The bottom two teams are plus 10,000.
I gotta dig. Oh, okay. Washington football team.
No. Washington team is plus 6,000. They're up.
Carolina?
No. Carolina's actually got decent. Well, they're plus 4,500. They're about mid.
Oh, I've got it. It's over now. Detroit Lions.
Detroit Lions are tied for the worst Super Bowl odds, plus 10,000, with one other team.
God, I can't even.
They were horrible this year, but you might not think, because they have one good player.
Huh. Horrible this year, but have one good.
Won 4 games this year.
They won 48. Oh, the Chargers?
Nope.
Okay, they have more than one good player. Can't be the Denver Broncos.
Have this one good player come next season.
Man.
If he gets his way.
Houston Texans.
Yes.
I forgot about them, yeah.
Plus 10,000, tied with the Detroit Lions for worst odds.
Yeah, of course they're going to have, because they're probably not going to have him this year. He's going to be, sitting on the bench or whatever. Yeah,
he's on the team right now, and that's still the worst odds. That's not good.
I would say that number one, the top is probably still the Chiefs. I would imagine.
Yep. Chiefs are number 1. Yep.
And then I would say Packers.
Correct. Number 2. Yep.
And then, because my pick is Packers versus Bills, so I'm going to go Bills number 3. Bills
are 5th. The Bucks are 3rd, and the Ravens are 4th.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about the Rams?
Rams are 6th, actually. Okay. Rams are 6th. Niners, Saints, Browns, Hawks, Dolphins, Colts, Chargers, Titans, Cowboys, Patriots, Steelers, Vikings, Panthers, Cardinals, Falcons, Bears, Raiders, Eagles, Broncos, Washington, Cincinnati, Giants, Jets, Jags, Lions, Texans.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Your Houston Texans plus 10,000. So if you want to,
that's embarrassing.
One shot. That's what it is. But yeah, Deshaun Watson is. I mean, it's crazy to see what could be a potentially Hall of Fame career just sort of eroding in front of our eyes and being wasted so unbelievably. But we'll see. Maybe he gets out of there. But speaking of Hall of Fame, we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and we're going to recap the 2021 Hall of Fame class that the NFL had, the guys that made the Hall of Fame this year. I have a couple things to point out and some interesting stats for that. In a little bit, we have to go through our own awards, the Benchies. We have a series of fun categories that we're going to use for the 2020 NFL season. NBA talk in a little bit, top of next hour. But yeah, like I said, we're going to touch on the Hall of Fame class for the 2021 NFL season and the NFL award winners, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. We're going to get into that and more. So stick around. We're going to come right back on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
If you think or know you had COVID-19, you can be around others after 10 days since symptoms first appeared and after 24 hours with no fever without fever-reducing medication and after other symptoms have improved. If you have tested positive for COVID-19 and you had no symptoms, you can be around others 10 days after you got tested for COVID-19. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/coronavirus.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I am still Lou Ruggieri. That's still Jose Ortiz. And this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. So far, so good. We touched on all our thoughts and feelings from Super Bowl 55, the legend of Tom Brady, the sadness of Patrick Mahomes, and what that means, and the odds. Houston Texans, your Houston Texans, the worst odds to win the Super Bowl next year, plus 10,000. Coming up a little bit, we have our own set of awards, the Benchies. We have Least Valuable Player, Give Your Contract Back Award, Freedom Award, Underachiever, and Overachiever of the Year, the Aaron Donald Award, Most Surprising Team, Most Disappointing Team. So we're going to get through all those coming up in a little bit. We have to go around the NBA and kind of see what's been going on there, give you your weekly NBA update so you can stay abreast of all things basketball. But now we have some NFL awards coming up, or they just came up, and we have to talk about them. The Hall of Fame class of 2021 is officially in the books. Jose, just some quick thoughts about each of these players. Just to get it out of the way. So guys that we don't necessarily care that much about, but I want to give them credit. Alan Faneca, Bill Nunn, John Lynch, Tom Flores. I mean, John Lynch, I guess we can talk a little about, but Tom Flores, those guys are, they were contributors in their own way. Alan Faneca, great offensive lineman. Bill Nunn was a scout. Tom Flores was a reporter, I believe. John Lynch is, he was a safety for the Bucks and the Broncos, and now he's the GM of your San Francisco 49ers and doing a wonderful job with staffing there. But some of these other guys I want to talk a little more about, and you can take your pick. Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, Calvin Johnson, Drew Pearson. I guess, you know what? Drew Pearson, I'm happy finally got in. Drew Pearson was the Cowboys wide receiver. He was the original 88 club member. He was the original Cowboys 88 that Michael Irvin took and ran with, like quite literally. So it took him a long time to get in, and I have to say that I'm very happy that he made it, not only as a Cowboys fan, but I felt like he was he should have been in there. I mean, his career was, it's hard to look at different generations and different eras, but his career, he was 1973 to 1983, so 10-year career. He had 7,822 yards, 48 touchdowns, 489 receptions, which, is not great. But if you put that in context, he had 3 first-team All-Pro seasons, 3 Pro Bowl seasons. So, long time, great player. I'm glad that he made it.
The one thing, one thing I know about Drew Pearson, I didn't know a lot of his stats or anything like that, but one thing I do know about Drew Pearson is that, we hear the term Hail Mary a lot. In 1975, Roger Staubach threw a game-winning touchdown to Drew Pearson, and when reporters asked Roger Staubach about the throw, he said, "I just closed my eyes and said a Hail Mary." So Drew Pearson is the recipient of the very first Hail Mary pass in NFL history. And
right there, that should garner him entry. Hall of Fame.
Yeah, just as far as like historical impact, and that's kind of what I look at, like a guy like Peyton Manning. I obviously don't have to get to how his stats are amazing. He's just ridiculous numbers. I didn't have them up in front of me, but we already know he's among the greatest of all time as far as statistics. But what separates Peyton Manning to me from a lot of other quarterbacks not named Tom Brady is the way he changed the game. I really believe when you look at how he was operating in the pocket, the before the snap reads, the changing of the play, the kind of the quarterback becoming the offensive coordinator on the field, I really feel like that all started with Peyton Manning and the way he had command of the offense. And perhaps that was somewhat to this detriment as well. But I think just the expectations now that we have on quarterbacks about the way how well they should know the offense and all the different things, to me, that all started with Peyton Manning, and he's absolutely deserving of being a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and just a correction, Flores was a head coach for the Raiders and Seahawks, by the way. I messed that up. He wasn't a reporter. But Peyton Manning, yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, I think just staggering stats, 5-time MVP, 2003, 2004, 2008, 2009, 2013. He just 71,000 yards, 539 touchdowns. I mean, he was first team All-Pro 7 times. And he was second team All-Pro 3 times.
In the same conference with Tom Brady.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, Peyton Manning almost, it feels like, I don't even know who you could relate him to. Maybe like Akeem Olajuwon with Jordan,
where I feel like a more of a Karl Malone, but that's fine too. Akeem Olajuwon.
But Olajuwon won.
Yeah,
Peyton
that's true.
Won twice.
Yeah.
He did get past Tom Brady, and in some regards, I think beating Tom Brady and the Patriots was probably a bigger success than actually winning the Super Bowls those years. But Peyton was just, and like you said it. I mean, just watching him. I think the offensive coordinator for the Colts or the Broncos was the easiest job in the world. You just say, "Here, Peyton, let's I'll give you 4 plays and do what you want," and it is what you said. And I think to the point where even playing Madden against the Colts, they would have him take the play clock down to like 2 seconds, changing plays at the line. I used to get like, come on, man. And just his intelligence and his acumen and his knowledge of the game was just unparalleled. It really was. And I think that, it was sad to see him kind of have to leave, because he's only he's drafted 2 years before Tom Brady, and he's been out for 5. It's just crazy.
He kind of fell off of a cliff a little bit. Like his body just wasn't holding up the same way some of these other guys are. But yeah, great player, great player. And like honestly, like I still will 100% say that I think he's a more talented, just physically more talented quarterback than Tom Brady was. But Tom Brady had a mental toughness and a physical toughness that Peyton just didn't have, and that was the difference. I mean,
it was also those early Super Bowls. Those early Super Bowls that Brady won. I mean, that was heavily predicated on having one of the best defensive teams we've ever seen. And as we just saw in this last Super Bowl, great defense tends to beat a great offense in big games like that. And Peyton Manning, while his offense was basically unstoppable for most of the year, their defense wasn't great. The one time that their defense was really good, they won the Super Bowl. So that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
And it was a product of, running up against just impossible I mean, there was the goal line stand that the Patriots had against Peyton Manning in the AFC Championship. I mean, that was defining. I mean, that was one of the defining moments of both of those teams' trajectories. But yeah, Peyton Manning, I often wonder what would have happened if the Colts chose Ryan Leaf instead of Peyton Manning in that draft. I wonder, would the Chargers have taken, what would have happened if the Chargers took Peyton Manning? Like how the NBA or the NFL would have changed and what would be different right now? Because who knows? It's just it's so bizarre that how close they were to draft. I mean, Ryan Leaf has had a Colts jersey made for him. That's how close they were. So, but beyond him, Calvin Johnson, I think, is the other one. I was a little surprised that Calvin Johnson got in first ballot. Not shocked, but a little surprised. I guess maybe a lot of the writers, the younger writers probably got him in because he was the most dominant receiver that I think we've seen, since Randy Moss.
Yeah.
What was surprising to me was that Calvin Johnson was from 2007 to 2015. He was only first team All-Pro 3 times. And that seemed odd to me. So I went back and I looked who were the first team All-Pros in the years that he didn't get it. So he was 3 years in a row. It was 2011, 12, and 13. Megatron was first team All-Pro with Wes Welker in 2011, Brandon Marshall in 2012, and Josh Gordon in 2013. Josh Gordon was first team All-Pro in 2013.
He had an amazing season. That year.
The years that Calvin Johnson was not first team All-Pro, these are the receivers that were ahead of him in the All-Pro rankings. 2007 was Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. All right. 2008, Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Johnson. 2009, Andre Johnson and Wes Welker. 2010, Reggie Wayne, and get this, Roddy White was first team All-Pro over Calvin Johnson.
I don't know what kind of year he had, but Roddy White did have a couple of years where he was just...
He was great.
He was on the Falcons, and he was just... I think he was Falcons player, yeah, and he was just incredible. But yeah, I think Calvin Johnson got in so early this first ballot because basically for about a 5-year stretch he was clearly the best wide receiver in the game. I know that he didn't get first team All-Pro during those times, but he would have a 1,900 season, which was preceded by a 1,600 season. Like he's just such highs with him, and then just the physical specimen, and knowing that he left a lot out on the field. I mean, his last year he had 1,200 yards. You can't tell me he didn't have 2 or 3 more years left at least. So
yeah, and then in 14 and 15, just to round out that list, Antonio Brown and Des Bryant in 14, and then 2015, Antonio Brown and Julio Jones. So you start to see the emergence of Antonio Brown's greatness along there. So yeah, Megatron, he 7 seasons with 1,000+ receiving yards. That season that you're talking about, 1,964 yards in 2012. Like, that's got to eat him alive that he couldn't get 36 more yards for that. I mean, that would have just. I mean, I guess he's in the Hall of Fame, so I guess it doesn't matter. But that would have just propelled him into just a different stratosphere altogether. But
how does he only have 5 touchdowns that season? I'm just looking at his numbers. I'm like, how on earth did you have 1,900 yards and only 5 touchdowns? Like, what?
He's on the Lions, because in the red zone.
Before he had 16 though. Okay, I digress.
But yeah, Calvin Johnson just unreal. I mean, he's 6'5", 237. He was just, like I said, he was like a bigger Randy Moss. And it's sad that he didn't pull a Matt Stafford and try to be traded, because I would have loved to seen him on a team that was a little more competent than the Detroit Lions. But
absolutely.
And then finally, Charles Woodson.
I'm sorry, Charles Woodson. What am I talking about? Rod Woodson. Close position.
Yeah, similar. Charles Woodson, unbelievable. I mean, he's all-decade team of the 2000s. First team All-Pro 4 times. He was 9 Super Bowls. He won with Green Bay. He's the answer to a lot of trivia questions. He's one of only 2 players in history to win the Heisman Trophy and the Super Bowl in his career. Do you know who the other one is?
Desmond Howard.
Yes, but also Marcus Allen. Actually,
Marcus Allen. Yeah. So yeah. Wait. So only a few players, because didn't Peyton Manning win the Heisman Trophy? No. Wow. Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I missed part of the stat. It's one of only 2 players with Hall of Famer Marcus Allen to win the Heisman Trophy, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and a Super Bowl.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
There's something else.
Because I was like, I know there had to be some other because I was like, I think Roger Staubach won Heisman as well.
Yeah, obviously Marcus Allen won the offensive side of those things, but defensive player of the year, rookie of the year. So yeah, Charles Woodson, unbelievable. I mean, I remember him mostly from his Green Bay days.
It's funny. I actually remember him mostly from the one-handed interception he had when he was in Michigan and won the Heisman as a defensive player, which is probably maybe his greatest accomplishment, honestly. Like, to win a Heisman Trophy at the defensive position is just incredible. I know he was a return man too, so that had something to do with it. But I'm looking at his stats. He's number 6 all time. Or he's tied for 5th all time in interceptions, career interceptions. He also had 11 interception return touchdowns throughout his career. I mean, he's just basically the player that you want in your secondary to kind of take you to that next level. Yeah, Charles Woodson, great player. Absolutely no-brainer for the Hall of Fame.
And then the NFL award winners for this season that we haven't talked about, we touched on some of them last week, but the ones that were held out and we didn't know till this week, Aaron Rodgers, not surprising, won Most Valuable Player. Aaron Donald, Defensive Player of the Year. Derrick Henry wins Offensive Player of the Year, and Comeback Player of the Year was Alex Smith, as I think we predicted several weeks ago. As soon as Alex Smith took a snap on a football field, he became Comeback Player of the Year, and I don't think it was even close. I know some people were talking about Ben Roethlisberger and a couple other guys, but no, that's just.
Well, basically, since Alex Smith could have died, right? You know, it's one thing. I was hurt last year. The other than to come back from death's door and go play football. I just want to say, while I'm very happy for Aaron Donald winning Defensive Player of the Year, I feel like there might have been an argument for T.J. Watt being snubbed here. I was just kind of comparing their numbers here. If you look at so T.J. Watt, I'm just going to give you the numbers and you tell me who had a better season. Mm-hmm. So one player had 13.5 sacks, 45 tackles, 14 tackles for a loss, and 28 quarterback hits. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and 4 forced fumbles. The other player, 2 forced fumbles, 15 sacks, 53 tackles, 23 tackles for a loss, and 41 quarterback hits.
It's pretty good.
TJ Watt should have been Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know what metric they were looking at. And, I get annoyed with analytics and things like that because it's like, if you have to invent a stat to tell me why a guy is good, I don't care. I want him to be good by the stats that everyone else has always been good by. Do you have a lot of sacks? You don't? Then get out of my face. I don't want to hear about the other metrics, what your pressure rate is, all this other stuff. Do you get to the quarterback? I
think that part of that award, though, was I think they did measure how many times they were double teamed.
Yeah, that's true.
Donald was essentially getting those stats being against 2 guys every single play, almost.
Yeah, that's fair.
You grade on a curve in that way, it sort of evens out a little bit. But
other than that, Alex Smith, a great comeback player of the year. And honestly, we named an award after Aaron Donald, so I can't. The NFL's like, just give it to Aaron Donald. Come on, guys. But I feel like T.J. Watt may have deserved it this year.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers winning MVP. I kind of wanted to see Derrick Henry win MVP. I knew he wouldn't with Aaron Rodgers throwing for 48 touchdowns, but a guy runs for 2,000 yards and isn't the MVP. I mean, that's
unusual. Usually you get something. Get a co-MVP at the minimum.
Right. I mean, Adrian Peterson MVP, Chris Johnson was MVP, Terrell Davis was MVP.
I think Barry Sanders was co-MVP with Brett Favre the year he went to 2,000 yards.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of, I don't know. I kind of felt bad for him a little bit. So either way, so those are the NFL awards and the Hall of Fame inductees for 2021.
Congratulations.
So, we have our own awards coming up in a little bit. The Benchies. One of those is the aforementioned Aaron Donald Award because we decided that it's the best defense specifically for this purpose. This is exactly why we named it the Aaron Donald Award, because we thought that every season that Aaron Donald plays, he could probably win the Defensive Player of the Year award. So let's just take him off the board as like the free space in the bingo board, and we'll just name it after him so that he is no longer a participant. So we can give it to somebody else who is obviously also almost as deserving. So that's what we did. So it proves our point exactly.
Yeah.
And we have a few more categories: Freedom Award, Underachiever, Overachiever, Most Surprising Team, Most Disappointing Team, Give Back Your Contract Award, and Least Valuable Player. So we have those to look forward to. But first, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we have to talk some NBA. We have to go around the NBA, kind of get caught up with everything that's going on. There's an interesting trade, potentially some East Coast, West Coast action. We'll get into it. So stick around. We're going to come right back on the Benchwarmers podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.